essentially like a chewing gum of Western animation, have been chewed by Japanese and exported back to the Western world, right? Greetings, this is Eugene the Philosopher, the greatest living philosopher after the unfortunate passing of Quentin Robert D. Nameland, who has been the greatest living philosopher before me. Let's talk about anime. Now I'm still thinking how to call this video. It's either gonna be something like anime is a reverse cargo cult. We'll talk about what it is sometime later, or maybe why anime is bad for your health, because it is, or maybe why anime can make you a zombie or something like that. Well, I'll make up some fancy title, okay? But we're gonna be talking about anime, obviously, and we're mostly gonna focus on specifically like modern popularity of anime. And by modern, I mean like the last 30 years or something like that, alright? So when anime became really popular in the Western world specifically, alright? And of course you might say, and any like Japanese aficionado would tell you like, oh, you know, anime is like 3,000 years old, like Japanese culture is really, really old, etc., etc. But again, you probably know my stance on these things. Like you can safely ignore all of this BS. Like this is all just pure mythology. And we'll see later why, at least why I think that is the case. Like in reality, like the first animation that could be considered anime, and I mean even like the drawings that could be considered anime, at least in the sense of the word that I'm gonna be using, would be White Snake Enchantress, which came out in 1958, so very late actually, right? And still the style of it would be different from what I would call anime proper, which means like literally these last few decades of popularity, alright? So the current style of anime actually appeared in the early 1980s, mostly owing to the works of Osamu Tezuka. Please don't confuse with Osama bin Laden, even though like the cultural impact is similar. And why is that the case? Why did anime appear so late, actually? Again, especially if you believe that Japanese culture is like millions of years old, right? Well, it has to do with Asian mentality, and we'll talk about this thing a lot in this video. So, namely, I'm gonna be claiming that Asian mentality, and okay, when I'm saying Asian, with regards to this video, I specifically mean East Asian. So that's like Chinese, Korean, and Japanese, basically. Okay? This is what Asian in the context of this video means. Asian mentality is focused around following, actually. And more specifically, following Western people, alright? And see my video about China, where I claim that China will never become a world leader in anything because China will always strive to follow the Western people, pretty much. At least the modern China, alright? Because again, it's a very young state. Hence, like their main modus operandi, if you wish, like the mode of being is copying things, Western things, and then mass producing them. That has been like the staple of Asian modernization pretty much in the last, actually 200 years or about so. Maybe even more than that. And hence, and this is one of the main points of this video, anime is just an Asian adaptation of Western comic books and Western cartoons. More specifically, American cartoons. More specifically, American cartoons imported into the Japan with American troops after World War II, when Japan became occupied by American troops. So, yeah, that's pretty much the phenomenon of anime. It's American troops occupying Japan, bringing these comic books and cartoons with them, and Japanese people, as usual, following them, like copying them. So anime is, in a way, a product of American culture in the first place, alright? And speaking about mentality, again, it's very characteristic that purely, like the first purely original genre of anime had to do with robots, right? The so-called mecha, M-E-C-H-A, alright? So, and it's understandable why, because again, well, okay, we'll go into a little bit deeper into the mentality point a little bit later, but for now I want to mention that it's understandable because, again, post-war Asia was being quickly industrializing, right? So we have pretty much everywhere. In China, in Japan, in Korea, like in 1946, Sony company appears, right? They start selling electronics in Japan. In 1947, I mean, it was very small, obviously, initially. In 1947, LG appears in Korea. They sell plastic. In late 60s, like Samsung enters the electronics market. Before that, which is again characteristic, they've been selling like noodles and fish, all right, and rice and things like that, basically. So yeah, what I'm saying is Asia is the perfect place for something like that. And by something like that, I mean rapid industrialization using Western blueprints. Like already like made, you know, like how Germany was industrializing in 1870s, let's say 1860s, or France, etc. So Japan could do just literally copy the same thing in 1940s, you know, in 1950s. So like 80 years after Europe was industrializing, but using literally the same blueprints. And again, as I've said, it's very fitting for Asian mentality. And yeah, so as modern Russian thinker Sergei Pereslegin says, sustainable development is only possible when it's like catching up. And it's the perfect example of that, right? Asian industrialization. Like it's very sustainable because again, it's just catching up to Europe, like just doing literally the same things, just perhaps even on larger scale, right? And more efficiently in the first place. So yeah, and Asian people are perfect at doing something like that. So why Asia? Why Mecca? Because again, like Asian people are like robots. You give them a program, you say, well, here in Europe we do it like this, and they just repeat it literally like robots and get even better results potentially, right? Something like that, because they're so diligent, you know, at following programs essentially. So yeah, they're like robots. Asian people, I would claim, have very little, if any, like creative innovation in them, you know, this creative spark, because, well, it's understandable why, because one needs freedom to have something like that, right? And Europe is the place for freedom. We have like traditions of Greece and Rome and things like that, whereas like democracy, art, philosophy, right? And in Asia, you have nothing of that. I mean, you have some philosophy, I guess, some art, I guess, but it was a completely different culture all the way. So Asian people are incredibly robotic. They are very diligent and thorough, but they lack this spark, this sort of like, what if I do it the other way? You know, what if I say, screw you all? I have a mind of my own, you know, this inventive spark that basically, brought up Western civilization in the first place. This Prometheus fire, you know, something like that. Yeah, so Prometheus is a very anti-Asian myth, actually, but it's very European at the same time. So, well, I have even a personal anecdote about this. I have a Chinese student. So basically, so I can explain all the principles to him, like how like, what are the laws, like what are the rules, etc. And then, like, I give him a problem and he doesn't know how to do it, like how to solve it. Like, he's like, hey, I don't know. But if you show him, like, I've explained, like, all the general stuff, right? Like, on like a metaphysical level almost. But he cannot apply it. But once I show at least one example of how to do this problem, like similar problem, let's say, he can follow it, like, step by step with extreme precision and like, very thorough, very quickly, right? So this is exactly what I'm talking about. So, yeah. You know that, like, the Russians have a saying, "Научи дурака Богу молиться, он лоб расшибет," which means kind of like, if you teach a fool to pray to God, he would smash his forehead eventually. Which means, like, he would overdo it, right? He would, like, smash his forehead on the floor or something like that. So, and it kind of applies to Asian people a lot as well. Like, you give them example, as I've said, and they repeat it, but they sometimes go a little bit too far with it, right? In terms of scale, in terms of, like, intensity, like, you know, any copy is like a concentrate, right? It's like the same thing, but kind of magnified in a way. So, and since they are so persistent in copying and mass producing stuff, they sometimes also go a bit too far with this. Again, all of these proverbial examples of the Japanese working schedules, right? Even look at, like, speaking about anime, look at these manga-ka people, like people who write, draw manga, like the, you know, comic version of anime, basically. Or actually, they would claim, of course, it's the anime is the cartoonish version of manga, right? What's the meme about, don't say anything about anime if you haven't read manga, something like that. So they have also crazy working schedules. They have to produce like a few pages of this stuff every day, pretty much, right? Like for years, literally. And there's only like a few thousand people all over Japan doing this. So yeah. Speaking of China, for example, see how Chinese people say, well, in the Western world, streaming is pretty popular. Let's just copy it and mass produce it, like literally factory scale production of streaming. And I'm gonna perhaps even show a video on the screen right now where you would see, or a screenshot maybe, where you would see this Chinese streaming factory is the only term I can use here. Okay. Yeah. So, and this is another example, like one of the reasons why AI, for example, even the modern, like underdeveloped AI can fake anime style so easily. Well, it's because it's so standardized, so robotic. It's so just like, same thing, just copied in various forms, right? So, yeah. Yeah. And, okay, I've had another idea, but I've forgotten. So let's just move on. So this is what anime is, essentially, in a nutshell. An idea of a cartoon taken from Western culture, but then turned into a mass-produced, highly concentrated copy. Essentially, if you like break a piece down into, like a piece of food, for example, into ingredients, then like enhance every one of these ingredients, like make a concentrate out of it, and then mix it all together. You get like a very artificial, a very unhealthy product as a result of this, right? Like imagine if you had I don't even know, but like a concentrate of every ingredient of I don't know what, a piece of bread, and you mix these concentrates together rather than just having a piece of bread, right? So it would be something very different, right? So yeah, and this is kind of what anime is as well, and what a lot of other products of this Eastern Asian culture, of copying Western culture specifically. This is why, like, I don't even know, but intuitively it all feels very unhealthy, like what Asians do, to be honest. Like, again, they kind of lack the temper, lack the feeling of measure, you know, like, there should be some limit, like, you don't pray until you smash your forehead, right? So, yeah. So that's why it looks and feels so deliberately artificial, anime included. Actually, anime more than anything else, I would say. Like, it's like fast food again. Fast food would be probably the most closest example to this sort of approach. And that's why anime is so intense and, again, I would claim unhealthy. Especially for young men who kind of take it seriously because they don't have the previous experience of these European originals, essentially, or at least American originals, which are kind of semi-European at least. So, yeah, they've never watched the classics, even more so read the classics, read the manga, right? Don't watch the anime, don't watch the movie, read the book. Well, do at least something, you know, something of that sort. But all of this is boring, right, for young people, because, again, watch my video about school education. Like, if you want to hide something from youth, put it in a school program. They'll never look for anything interesting there. School is, by definition, boring, like, not needed in life, right, etc., etc. So, if you have some dangerous thinker, like Eugene the philosopher, for example, put them in the school program. Like, they would never be accessed by youth. Never, ever, right? So, yeah. And that's why it's kind of dehumanizing, again, returning to the issue of artificial character, very intense, because it's a mixture of concentrates, right? Mixture of ideas taken from here and there, but each one of them, like, magnified sevenfold, right? So, and you might say that anime is initially for like Peter Pans, like infantile adults essentially, or straight up young people in the first place, because again, it's cartoons. Like who watches cartoons? It's young kids, right? Kind of like, you know, McDonald's, again, returning to the analogy with fast food, kind of like McDonald's became popular by advertising to kids, right? We have all these bright colors, we have a clown, we don't sell beer or whatever, etc., etc. So, anime is also popular thanks to kids mostly, right? Plus, again, it's intense. It has its own recognizable style, so it can kind of catch you up. Like you're either watching an anime or you're watching a normal cartoon, right? Like, you can clearly see the difference, right? So you're either into anime or you're into everything else pretty much. So anime kind of drags you into its own world. So, and the amount of content is gigantic. And let's face it, like the technical quality of it is also as well, because it's again, it's made with this, roughly speaking, Asian thoroughness and roboticness. Yeah. So yeah, I guess if, like, okay, well, I wouldn't go into this rabbit hole, but maybe ask me in the comments what I wanted to talk about if I wouldn't forget. So yeah, and elites are not against it, obviously, neither European nor American. Like Japanese definitely are not against it because again, you can poison the youth with this strong and addictive, concentrated content, right? And to essentially prevent change, because it's these young people who are supposed to make change in the society, in the world, anywhere really. But if you kind of poison them initially, if you give them this concentrate, this virtual reality where they can live in, instead of living in the real world, then there would be no change. Like in Japan, there is certainly like a significant disenfranchisement of young men, you know, breaking of this wild Japanese spirit, because it's really warlike. It's really, how do you call it? Like, well, not very friendly, let's put it this way, right? And, of course, they have, various problems such as overpopulation, various connected societal pressures, like economics is in shambles for many decades already. Right? I mean, they're an occupied country in the first place. Like, so anime helps channeling all of this frustration after the lost war, right? It provides a means of escaping somewhere into this world of cartoons, essentially. So when a Japanese man has no hope in real life, he can at least watch the cartoons. I mean, they're fancy, right? So that's where you get this culture of hikikomori, you know, the men who never leave home, essentially. So it's again, it's smashing your forehead, right, while praying to God. And Americans are not against it either, because it keeps Japanese docile and tamed, right? And plus, again, as we can see, it can be imported back home to the United States and to Europe. And maybe that's how anime reverse cargo cult was introduced in the first place. And so let's finally talk about what a cargo cult is and what a reverse cargo cult is. So, a cargo cult is just like a normal sociological term. Like it comes from like Western people visiting some like remote areas of the world where people have never encountered civilization at this scale, right? So these peoples, like these aborigines, have witnessed Europeans flying on planes, like landing on airfields, and like dropping various cargo from the sky, right, on parachutes. And they started building their own mock-up planes and airfields made of like wood and straw, because they thought that it's what Europeans were doing. They were like doing these rituals to summon the gods to throw stuff out of the sky, right? So they hoped if they built their own planes like this, the gods would also throw stuff from the sky to them, right? But obviously it didn't happen. So this is the cargo cult. That's why it's called cargo, because it's literally about cargo. Summoning the cargo with building mock-up airplanes. Well, what is a reverse cargo cult? Why do I call anime a reverse cargo cult? Well, actually, let me go even a step back further. Actually, the term reverse cargo cult was coined by Ekaterina Schulman, a politologist whom I've already mentioned once, or at least once, maybe twice. So what she calls a reverse cargo cult is a sentiment among Russian elites, where Russian elites are saying, well, Western people are talking about democracy and human rights, but even in the Western world, and like they're trying to bring it like to places like Russia, whereas in reality, even in the Western world, these things aren't real. So they're basically, according to Schulman, are claiming that even the Western people's airplanes are also mock-up, right? That's kind of the idea. So, yeah. Hopefully you get the idea, right? They're claiming that, okay, we're Aborigines, we're like super, let's say, far behind in development, but actually even Western people are also the same Aborigines with the same mock-up planes, right? They're just making how do you call it? Making a show of it, right? They're pretending that they're real. But at least we're not pretending they're real, right? Or something like that. What I call reverse cargo cult, however, is, look at this step. So Japan introduces a cargo cult of Western animation and produces an anime, right? And then this anime, as supposedly a Japanese product, is imported back to the Western world, to Europe and United States, and is then becoming popular there and copied there. So it's a cargo cult of Western animation in Japan, then the reverse cargo cult of anime in the Western world. That's what I mean. Maybe calling it like secondary cargo cult would be more reasonable, but I don't know. I feel like reverse cargo cult is somewhat more fun. Ironically, by the way, in Russia itself and like in general post-USSR countries, anime is only popular because it's popular in the Western world, right? So it's like a tertiary cargo cult. So, cargo cult of Western animation in Japan, cargo cult, reverse cargo, secondary cargo cult of anime in Western world, then tertiary cargo cult of anime in like the post-USSR, right? Okay, so returning to the issue of like conspiracy theories, etc. One might claim, again, if you're like conspirologically minded, that anime was propagandized in the Western countries, in places like California specifically, to promote racial mixing, right? Because let's just face it, like Asian girls owe around 99% of their popularity to anime. Like, let's just be real about it, right? Okay, so, to conclude this rant, anime is a product of Japan copying of Western animation. So there was a cargo cult of Western animation in Japan initially. Then, it became popular in the West. So it became a reverse cargo cult, essentially like a chewing gum of Western animation, have been chewed by Japanese and exported back to the Western world, right? So West took interest in it, so it's a reverse cargo cult or a secondary cargo cult. It's a cargo cult of a cargo cult. It's the same thing that the West already has, but it's in a very simplified and secondary form, like a food concentrate or fast food. And that's why it's very unhealthy. That's why it can make you more or less a zombie if you indulge in it, because again, it's very intense on purpose. It's like these taste increasers, whatever the heck they're called, like this proverbial thing that they get from this seafood, which is again actually a characteristic, right? I forgot how it's called. Sorry. Hopefully you know what I mean. Maybe I'll put it in the comments when I look it up. All right. Yeah. That would be all, probably. Yeah. Thank you for watching. The eons are closing.
If you wish to support me, please consider joining my Patreon. That is patreon.com/philosopher. See the link in the description. Or if you have a scientific theory of your own and you'd like my help in developing it, please join my alternative science coaching program, also available through Patreon.